Hi everyone, just before I introduce our second Church Without Walls, just a wee note about our cafe. We are starting to really get a lot of messages and comments about when we're opening and if we're opening. The answer to if we're opening is absolutely yes, we are opening, but the answer to when, we just don't know 100% yet. We are hoping for first week of September, but we just need to see how things are with COVID-19 over the summer, with a lot of places opening back up again. You know, we have always been people before profit. That comes before anything for us. So we want to ensure our staff and our customers are safe and feel safe. So we're just going to keep an eye on things and yeah, hope for the 1st of September, but we'll just take it each week as it comes really. But tonight we are having our second virtual Church Without Walls. You know, this online experience has actually been great, weird but great. You know, we've got to connect with a lot of other people through this, and we've been able to grow the community. You know, a lot of people from all across Northern Ireland and beyond, which has been really great. Tonight we're so honoured we have Jen Clark sharing her story. She's a really phenomenal lady with a really great story to share, and we have the music from Frasans, who is just always incredible. I'm his #1 fan. So yeah, so sit back and enjoy. And first of all, we have a lovely song from two sisters, so get a cup of tea or coffee and enjoy.
Sisters, sisters, there were never such devoted sisters. Never had to have a chaperone, no sir. Oh, I'm here to keep my eyes on her. Caring, sharing, every little thing that we are wearing. When a certain gentleman arrived from Rome, she wore the dress, I stayed at home. Lord help the mister who comes between me and my sister. But Lord help the sister who comes between me and my man.
Come all proud, come all greedy, come all liars, come all shamed, come all wealthy, come receive it. To the table, come today. Come all broken, come all needy, come all poor and come all slaves, come all rulers, come be seated. Come all sinners, come all saints. Come to the table from near and far. Come from the shadows, come out of the dark. There's room at the table. We saved you a seat. Come to the banquet. Come join in the feast. Every race, every nation, come all rebels, come all gay. From the fringes come to Jesus, to a table full of grace. To the table come and save. Come to the table, come eat and drink. There's no inner circle. Come dine with the King. Recline at the table. Come let down your guard. You're never a stranger. Just come as you are. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Prepared is the table. We're ready to feast. The party's waiting. There's more still to feed. The harvest is ready. So go fill every seed. Go live out your mission. It's a kingdom of priests. Go live out your mission. It's a kingdom of priests.
Hi, good morning, John and all of the congregants and friends of Church Without Walls, and Yuri. I'm very privileged and pleased to be chatting with you all this morning. John had sent me a few questions last week to sort of try and answer, so I'll do my best to do that for you all for a little bit this morning. My name is Jennifer Clark, but most people call me Jen. Not Jan. Sometimes I get Jen a lot, but it's actually Jen. And I live in Rostrevor, and I help contribute to this community called Oncuin here on Shore Road, 44 Shore Road, a beautiful location. I'm obviously, as you can tell from my accent, not from here originally. I was born in America, and I'm from America, but I've lived here in Northern Ireland for the last 20 years. So my husband, Johnny, is from here. All my 3 boys were born here. So this is very much my home. So I'm delighted to be sharing with you this morning. So I'll start by answering a couple of questions that John sent, which is, how did I come to faith? Which I think is always one of my favorite questions to ask people who are in any sort of faith spectrum or, work in any kind of sphere that we understand. Because for a lot of people, there are a lot of different stories. And my story is that I was raised by a single parent. My mom raised myself and my brother. My dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he left us when I was 8 years old. And as difficult as that was, I saw my mother's faith be something that really sustained her through that time. She's incredibly strong and incredibly bright. Likewise, my grandmother had a very strong Christian faith. So I have lots of memories of being, like many of you possibly, being drug along to church services and sort of being made to sit in the back and possibly be quiet and, that sort of thing. But for my entire childhood, my faith, although I feel like I was absorbing things and I was learning about how relationships can be reconciled and how people can look out for one another, and especially as the parent of the child of a single parent rather, growing up in a church, we never quite fit in, but we found a few spaces where we were accepted for who we were, and those people remain a couple of the greatest contributors to my faith journey I've had as a child. But as I said, my mom raised us as a single parent. We never quite fit in. I never quite we never quite fit in anywhere, really, to be honest. So we made friends with other Christians who were on the margins from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different perspectives. And what they taught me is that there is space for everyone in God's kingdom. And as a child, I remember having barbecues and card games around our table, in our house, from people from the church, from very different backgrounds, immigrants, people of different, sexual orientations, people of different, all sorts of different ways they found themselves to this table. And my mom was wonderful at creating community for them. So that one of my earliest memories, or some of my earliest memories, was watching her sort of love people around her. So, and then I sort of came to real faith when I was about 18 and decided to do a DTS, or discipleship training school, like a training school with YWAM, and I did that in 1998 in Banbridge. So if anybody was in Banbridge in 1998, shout out to you. But my faith journey, like anybody else's journey, is a learning experience. And one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou, which is, and I'll paraphrase, it's something like, don't be hard on yourself for who you were then, because we'll all take a journey and learn things that we know now. So don't look back and sort of disparage in who you were then, because when you know better, you do better. And that for me has been my big my big journey of faith here. My faith journey has changed, I think, in the biggest way, that instead of being part of a church community or loving Jesus because I wanted to get out of hell free card, I've learned to sort of flip that a little bit. And instead of fleeing from something, I believe that God's called us to something. So instead of running away from sin and trying my best to be holy and trying my best to escape, which is a little bit of the message that I was taught as a child. You need to repent, you need to follow the rules, and if you don't follow the rules, you won't make it into heaven. And as my faith journey has evolved, I realized that actually God isn't calling us away from darkness. He isn't calling us away to be separate and pure. When we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was one who took something that the world told him was unworthy and the world told him was unholy, and he touched it and he made it right again. And so for me, that my faith journey has been, instead of running away from darkness, is running towards it. And so that's a lot of that. Another thing that gives me hope for the future, that was the other question, is I'm currently looking at the state of the world, right? So here we are in the middle of, well, we've got Brexit, we've got climate change, we've got coronavirus. I'm obviously from America and I'm watching that unfold. And what I'm also watching unfold in the United States is the civil unrest, right? So the very necessary but very painful bearing witness, right, to what has been done to people of color, African Americans specifically, through the history of the United States. And as I look through that, I look at mass unemployment, I look at a traumatized Europe coming out of coronavirus, I look at people who don't know how they're going to put food on the table. And what I've learned in this time is the importance of lament. And lament, you go through the prophets, you read Micah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, all of the prophets. They knew how to weep with those who wept. And for me, that has been the biggest tool that I've learned in this time. I've looked at the state of the world, and I've been able to lament. And let me tell you that what lament is not, it is not self-pity, right? It is not complaining. What it is a constructive exercise in naming what you're carrying: sadness, grief, disappointment, all of those things that we're all experiencing in this very uncertain time. Look anywhere in the world. Those kind of, the importance of recognizing, giving space to, and bearing witness to the pain in the world, and you being able to, us being able to turn that into a lament, a prayer for God to see, a prayer for us to process, to give space to all the gamut of human emotions that everyone is feeling, from deep disappointment, despair at times. I thought, I've looked at the world and I thought, how are we ever going to get better? I've looked at, broken relationships. How are those going to be restored? And instead of complaining or going down a spiral of, what I would call sort of self-indulgent kind of emotion, what we do is we take those, we bear witness to those emotions, we bear witness to that pain, to that suffering, to that grief. We bear witness to it in the sense that we make a prayer of lament. And I think it is so important for us in this time to be able to sit with those painful emotions at times, our own pain and other people's pain, the uncertainty of the world. And Jesus came into that, like I said, not to chase it away, but to help us be able to understand, to process, and to bring healing in life. And I heard a quote the other day. Somebody said, Socrates, Aristotle didn't weep. They never wept, but Jeremiah did, and so did Jesus. And that's how we want to be. We want to be a people who know how to bring the full expression of what God came to give us, which is full life. And that means that we have to sometimes look at things that are very sad and unpleasant. But I promise you that when you give God your pain, eventually that will become the gift that you give. And that's pretty much my story. So it's been lovely to be here with you guys, and bless you for all coming together in however form you can, and committing yourselves to being present and bear witness for one another. So, all my love. Bye-bye.
Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. There you go, lifting my load again. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. I come up under the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, his burden is so light. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. I come up under the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, his burden is so light. His burden is so light. His burden is so light. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. There you go, lifting my load again. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. I come up under the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, his burden is so light. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. Come up under the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, his burden is so light. 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 You're lifting my load. 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 You're
Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all keeping really well. It's brilliant to have you joining us tonight from the Velveteen Rabbit Cafe. And even though this place is empty tonight, all the tables and chairs are empty, nevertheless, I have my own little congregation just gathered there right behind me, if you can see them here. And because where 2 or 3 are gathered, Jesus is in the midst. And so really glad to be gathering with all of you tonight online virtually, and really trust you're keeping well. I really love a story that Peter Marshall used to tell about the little boy in Aberdeen whose mother used to discipline him when he was naughty, and she would used to say to him, "Now God doesn't like that." And when he was particularly disobedient, she would say to him, "God will be angry." Now usually those admonitions were sufficient, but one night she had prunes for dessert and he refused to eat them. She coaxed, she played with him, still he refused to eat the prunes. There they lay on his plate, the dark blue wrinkled tokens of his rebellion. And she said to him, "Now God won't like this. God doesn't like little boys not to finish all their prunes." But the wee lad was unmoved, and so she went on further to say, "God will be angry." But for some reason or other, the little boy stubbornly refused to eat the last 2 prunes which lay on his plate. And so his mother said to him, "Well now, you have been a very naughty boy. God is angry. You must now go to bed." So she packed him off upstairs to his bed. No sooner had she come down the stairs from his bedroom than a violent thunderstorm broke out. The lightning was more vivid than ever. The thunder clumped up and down the sky with shattering reverberations. The angry wind and threw handfuls of rain against the window panes. It was a most violent storm. And downstairs she thought to herself, "I'm sure that little boy's terrified. I should go up there and comfort him." And quietly she went up the stairs and opened the bedroom door, expecting to find him whimpering in fear, perhaps even hiding beneath the bed sheets. But to her surprise, he wasn't in bed at all. He had actually gone over to the window, and with his face pressed against the window pane, she heard him muttering to himself, "Oh, for goodness sake, such a fuss to make over 2 prunes." I always loved that story because of the way the little boy had the courage and the nerve and the audacity even to see through and even to speak through the imposition of fear by his mother, who did love him, but who nevertheless sought to make him afraid with those admonitions that God will be angry. And isn't it true that there's something about the use of fear as a weapon to impose control, to threaten, to intimidate into conformity and obedience, and into silence even? I often heard it when I was a small kid. "Now God is watching you." And it was never in the Bette Midler song kind of way, from a distance, God is watching you. But it was always, you better be on your best behavior kind of way, because God is watching and he sees behind both sides of every curtain. And he knows what you're up to better than you do. And so it's inevitable as you're growing up that you just develop this kind of mental image of God as a sort of cosmic traffic warden, with a magnifying glass in one hand and a big stick in the other hand. And the moment you park on his double yellow lines, well, you're really in for it. I always remember a lady whom I'd gone to see whose child was sick, very sick in the hospital. And I remember she said to me, "Do you think that this is my punishment?" I was amazed at that question and said, what do you mean? And she said, "Is this my punishment for smoking these damn cigarettes? I've tried to get off them many times, can't get off them. Is God now punishing me by making my little girl ill?" Where do we get these perceptions? Well, maybe sometimes we get them from bad preaching. Hell, fire and damnation. Fundamentalism with the fun taken out of it. That's the diet of sermons that some of us were raised on Sunday by Sunday, where we could almost feel the heat of the furnace at the soles of our feet. Sometimes we get it from bad preaching. Sometimes we get it from bad experiences as children. in the home or maybe in the church, bullying and guilt tripping and abuse even. You know, throughout this whole period of lockdown, I've actually been working in the kitchen of a nursing home, and I've been working alongside a wonderful lady who throughout most of her adult life so far has managed to avoid the church. And she tells me that it's because of one memory she can't get away from, when as a little girl she was sitting on the pew of her church whenever a mouse ran across the floor, and seeing the mouse she screamed out in terror. And in that moment, the minister, the preacher in the pulpit, hollered at her for breaking the sanctity of the house of God. And it just reminded me all over again that sometimes people never act as badly as when they're acting in the name of God and religion. Sometimes we get these perceptions just from plain living, because if we live long enough in this world, you know, we're going to go through some stuff. We're going to watch other people go through some stuff that's going to raise some very serious questions about the love and goodness of God. So often we have these perceptions in life, and it's always been that way. And so what Jesus wanted to do sometimes was to challenge those perceptions. And often he did it by telling a story. Because, you know, so often a story seems to have this magical way of revealing to us the contents of our hearts before we've even realized it. And in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells a story about this wealthy man who was going on a long trip away. And he had a problem, and that was what to do with all his money. In those days, there were no such things as banks or building societies. He was afraid that if he took his money with him, he might fall prey to highway thieves and robbers. And so he decided to do a very unorthodox thing. He decided to entrust his money to his 3 servants. We're told that he called them, and to one of them he gave 5 talents. Now, a talent was a sum of money. Scholars reckon that it would have been a colossal sum. Perhaps in today's terms, 1 talent might be the equivalent of about £1 million. And so to one servant he entrusted 5 talents. To another servant he entrusted 2, and to yet another he gave 1. And then he left on his trip and went away and was hardly out of sight when the story tells us that the first 2 servants began to wheel and deal, and they made the most of their opportunity, and somehow they managed to double what they'd been given. So the one who had 5 made it into 10. The one who had been entrusted with 2 made his into 4. But we're told that the 3rd servant was a much more cautious, fearful individual. And he took that 1 talent, hid it in a jar, and buried it under the cedar tree out in his backyard. Well, the story goes on. After a long while, the master returned and he called his servants to account. And the first 2 servants stepped forward, and they were over the moon to tell their master how they'd managed to double their stewardship. The master was completely overjoyed. A smile broke out on his face. Bells rang, trumpets blew. And he said to those 2 servants, "Well done. I gave you this little thing." It was a little thing for a wealthy man, these talents. "And you've made much of it. And I'm going to give you even more privilege than that. Please enter into the joy of my hearth and home." And there was just a great celebration at that point. But then the 3rd servant stepped forward, and when he did, the atmosphere just completely changed in the room. And there was this sheepish look in his eye. And when he was asked about his stewardship, this is what he replied. Let me read it to you from the text actually. "Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, 'Master, I know you who you are. You're a hard man, reaping where you have not sowed and gathering where you haven't scattered. And I was afraid of you. And so I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, take what is yours.' Now, at that response, no trumpets blew, no bells rang. In fact, we're told that the master was really grieved. And he upbraided that servant, and not only had him reprimanded, but we're told he had him thrown out into the outer darkness, into that place of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now again, remember that this is a parable. This is full of pictorial language. When Jesus refers to weeping and gnashing of teeth, he was borrowing a phrase from the Old Testament, because when the Jews used that phrase, weeping and gnashing of teeth, what they really meant it to describe was a life that was unfolding out into tragedy. Now, of course, the question is, why did the master get so upset? Well, I don't think it was simply because he was slothful or lazy or didn't appreciate the privilege to which he'd been entrusted. I think rather it was because of the perception that lay behind his action, or rather his inaction. It was his understanding of who the master was. That was what caused the most offence. Listen again to the words that came from his mouth about and toward his master. I know you who you are. You are a hard man. You gather where you haven't sowed. You scatter where you haven't reaped. And so I was afraid of you, and I went and hid the talent. Now, of course, that little speech that he gives, it begs the question, where on earth did he pick up that perception from? It seems to me that there's nothing to suggest any of that was a correct premise. By all accounts, this was a generous, benevolent, magnanimous, gift-giving, open-hearted, open-handed master. You know, he entrusted all this money to his servants. He rewarded them bountifully. He welcomed them into his own hearth and home. This was a man who was way out on a league of his own by first century master standards. Where then did this individual pick up this perception? I don't know. But what I do know is that this was at the root of his problem. And that's why he went and did what he did. You see, the other two servants in the story didn't think of their master as a hard man. Therefore, they weren't afraid of him. They didn't bury their talents. But this third one, in his heart, he regarded the master with such suspicion. He saw him as callous and spiteful and mean-spirited. And that's the reason why he did what he did. He did not believe in the love that was really there. Consequently, he was afraid, and so he buried his talent. And you see, that's always what fear and faulty perception causes us to do. They cause us to run away and to hide and to bury our lives before we're even dead. I was laughing there last week. Remember those awful thunderstorms that we had in the middle of last week? Some friends of mine were absolutely petrified by them. Grown women who have raised children and faced down all kinds of hurry fears in their lives, who'd rather hide away in the cubbyhole than see one streak of lightning. And I was telling one of them, maybe you should remember the story of the little girl who was walking through the streets with her mummy, and her mummy was trying to hurry her on because there was a thunderstorm breaking out, and she was trying to rush her on back to the house. And in the middle of the storm, every now and then, the little girl would stop and pause in the street, and when the lightning flashed, she would smile up at the sky. And her mother said to her, "What on earth are you doing?" And she said, "I'm smiling for the camera. Don't you know God's trying to take my picture?" You see, our perceptions are incredibly influential. And when people in their heart perceive of God as full of goodness and grace and glory and wonder and kindness and benevolence, then it seems that they'll build their lives on that. And their lives will reflect that, and they'll be full of that. It'll just seep out of them. Like the great German theologian Karl Barth that I was reading about recently, who after a full career of writing volumes and volumes and volumes of thick theology, reviewing his life, he said, "I've spent my entire career trying to make the word God a cheerful word again." And I just love that. Because when your perception of God is full of cheer and goodness, then you'll build your life on that. But when people see the opposite of that, and when they see God as pinched and punitive and foreboding and as one with razors up his sleeves, then it seems that they'll build their lives around that, and their lives will then reflect much of the same. And at the root of much of that will be this emotion of fear. I know you who you are, a hard man. gathering where you haven't scattered and reaping where you haven't sowed, and I am afraid of you, and so I go and hide my talent. You know, isn't it really crazy how dominated the landscape of our lives seems to be by fear, mine sometimes included? And we can think of all the external fears that we face at times, illness and job losses and COVID-19 even. But do you know, by far, the more subtle, insidious fears are the ones that lie buried in our human hearts. Fears of what people will think. Fears of what others will say. Fears of rejection. The fear of losing control. The fear of failure. How many of us, and we're afraid to step out or afraid to do something different because, well, what if it fails? Does that then mean that I myself am a failure? What about the fear to love or the fear to care? Because let's face it, there never are any guarantees. And what if I invest here and it doesn't work out? Like the woman I'd heard about who had engraved on her own headstone, "Return to sender unopened." I kind of laughed at that. But it reminded me of what C.S. Lewis once said, his famous quote, that to love is to be vulnerable. And love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. And so if you want to make sure that you keep your heart intact, give it to no one, not even an animal. Lock it up in the casket of your own selfishness. But know this, that in that casket, dark and motionless, it will change. It will not become broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable. Because to love at all is to be vulnerable. And sometimes we live with that fear of carrying, giving our hearts away. What about the fear of death? Boy, is that one that religion loves to manipulate and play on at times, as the fear that pervades all other fears. Or then there's just the fear to be human, just the fear to be real and authentic and honest and just to be yourself. And this is one that I can identify with a lot. You see, all through my own younger years, I was carrying a secret deep in my heart that was tormenting me, a secret that no one knew about. Despite the fact that I loved Judy Garland and had Prisoner Cell Block H posters on my bedroom wall and insisted on wearing a pink dicky bow to our family photograph at the age of 8, despite all of that evidence, this was a secret turning inside me that no one knew about. And I remember at the age of 19 when I had the courage to first tell someone and worked up that courage a long time, and this person and I were out walking in the park and I dared to tell her what it was that was tormenting me inside, and I couldn't even say the G word. I just spoke about this struggle with my emotions that I had inside, and I'll never forget that when she realized what it was I was actually saying, she physically took a step back from me and said, "That is sin." And she went and reported me to the church authorities for my internal struggle. And so no wonder it took me so long to even be open and honest about that. I zipped it up and hid it for so long. And you see, it's all fear. It's the fear that resides inside us. It's fear that's used as a weapon to control us and to coerce us and to make us toe the line, so that inevitably, like this man, we end up burying our lives before we're even dead. But what is it that breaks that? What is it alone that has the power to penetrate that kind of lockdown and beat it back and unlock it in our own lives? What alone has the power to do that? Well, it seems that there's only one thing, only one remedy, and that remedy is love. There's a verse in the New Testament that says that there is no fear in love, because perfect love drives away, casts out all fear. This is the one medicine. This is the one answer to our fear predicament. This is the one thing that has the power to break in and break through and liberate and heal us and remake us and bring us out of our hiding. And you see, where the spirit of love is and where it's contagious and cultivated and nurtured, then that's the place where you begin to find life and freedom and creativity and confidence and eloquence and wonder and glory and all these fruitful things. Because beyond all other things, the Bible says, beyond faith, beyond hope, beyond the nice words that can be spoken by men or even angels, beyond all the gifts that are available to humanity, the greatest of all, we're told, is love. Because God is love. And the face of God is Jesus. And as Richard Rohr says, if God is a Trinity, and if Jesus is the face of God, then it is a benevolent universe. Because God, therefore, is not someone to be afraid of, but is the ground of all being and is on our side. I think that needs to be said again. If God is a Trinity, and if Jesus is the face of God, then it is a benevolent universe, and God is not someone to be afraid of, but is the ground of all being and is on our side. And you see, it's that perception, it's that realization that is the thing that strips through fear again and again and again. All the fears that lie awake in our hearts. Fears imposed on us by others. Fears imposed on us by society or by religion. Or perhaps worst of all, the fears that we impose on ourselves. This is the one thing that has the ability to crack all of it open so that we start to live a different way. With authenticity as our own selves. And leaning into the love that really is there. Becoming not like the third servant in this story, who hid away and buried his talent for fear of someone that he never really knew, but bold enough and brave enough to be like the other two, who were so confident in who their master was, that they took what they had, they multiplied it, they maximized it, and gave it as gifts to the world. And you see, that's the power of what love can do. It can take a clenched fist and a closed heart and open up wide open to the world as in the cross. And that's what I've been experiencing in my life in recent times, and I know some of you have been as well. And so as we go on, let me just close. You know, one of my favorite things to do is to pick up these little quirky sayings or quotes or bits of information about different historical figures. And recently I came across this true story from the life of Thomas Edison. You remember Thomas Edison? He was the famous inventor. He invented over 1,000 inventions in his lifetime, from the light bulb to the battery to motion pictures. But I actually never knew the secret to Thomas Edison's life until I read this piece of information about him. That when he was a small kid, one day he came home and he gave a folded paper in an envelope to his mother. And he told her, "My teacher gave this to me and she told me to give it only to my mother." Well, his mother's eyes were tearful as she read the letter out loud to her child. She read, "Your son is a genius. This school is too small for him and doesn't have enough good teachers for training him. Please teach him yourself." Many years after Thomas Edison's mother had died, he was going through all the old cupboards and he actually found that folded letter that was given to him by his teacher for his mother. He opened it, and this is what the letter actually read. "Your son is mentally retarded. We cannot let him attend our school anymore. He is expelled." He wept when he read that. And then this is what he wrote in his diary. "Thomas Alva Edison was a mentally retarded child whose mother turned him into the genius of the century." And in one of the last interviews ever done with him, he said, "My mother was the making of me. She was so true and so sure of me. I felt I had someone to live for, someone I must not disappoint. Her love was always so steadfast. The memory of my mother will always be a blessing to me." And you see, that's the type of love that drives out fear and gives us our place in the world. The kind of love that, as this next song says, knows us to the bottom and yet loves us to the heights.
We've been hiding in the shadows.
We've been hiding in the shadows, lost and afraid of you.
We've been wandering.
We've been wandering
darkness.
in the darkness.
But if we only
We are
known in love,
known in love. We are known in love by you.
known,
We are known in love. Known in love. We are known in love by you.
you've been waiting to show us mercy.
You've been waiting to show us mercy.
Presence,
Your presence is
our home, your children,
we, your children.
love forever.
Love forever.
Every fear is gone.
Now every fear is gone. Known in love, we are known in love. We're known in love. We are known in love by you. We are known in love. Known in love. We are known in love by you. There is no fear anymore. 'Cause all that's left is mercy. There is no fear in your love. You're the God of mercy.
There's no fear.
There is no fear anymore.
All that's left.
All that's left is mercy. Oh, there is no fear in your love. In your love, no. We are known in love. Known in love. We are known in love by you. We are known in love. Known in love. We are known in love by you.
Hi everybody, Michelle here. I hope you've really enjoyed that tonight. Thanks very much for coming to join us at our virtual Church Without Walls. I hope everybody was blessed and encouraged by the stories we had tonight, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. God bless.
I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table one of these days. One of these days. I'm God's children gonna sit together. All of God's children gonna sit together one of these days, one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one